Welcome, everyone. This is Brett Pawlowski with the National Center for College and Career Transitions. We're hosting this call on behalf of the Pennsylvania Department of Education's Bureau for Career and Technical Education. We're talking with Gary Laird, who is the president of the Hanover Chamber of Commerce. We recently wrote a case study on their pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs, and we're here to talk to Gary to hear firsthand about their experiences with that. So, Gary, thank you for joining us. And let me just ask you if we can start by asking you to give us a brief overview of your apprenticeship programs.
Sure. So back in the fall of 2016, I was approached by some local manufacturers who were interested in having a conversation about apprenticeship programs for skilled positions in machining, welding, and industrial maintenance. So not having much knowledge, background, or experience with apprenticeships, we connected with the Office of Apprenticeship at Labor and Industry, Pennsylvania, and they were good enough to come down and have some additional conversations with us about how we might be able to approach an apprenticeship program that would be more community-based versus employer-based. So we decided after several meetings to move forward with a group model apprenticeship program that would be sponsored by the Hanover Area Chamber of Commerce. And the business partners who would participate would fulfill the requirements and criteria as required by the Office of Apprenticeship. So we moved forward with the application process, and we were approved in 2017. It only took a few months to get our application approved, and we have been moving forward ever since. The first step really for us was to develop a pre-apprenticeship program in our local high schools. We have outstanding relationships with 3 local school districts here within our community. And many of the key relationships that needed to be in place to make this pre-apprentice startup successful were already established between local businesses and the school districts. So we started a pre-apprenticeship program, which means students in their junior year in high school can enter into a pre-apprentice curriculum while in school. And as long as they meet the requirements of that pre-apprenticeship program, along with their other general ed requirements for graduation, they can participate in the pre-apprentice program. So what that means is throughout that 2-year period, they will be doing lab-type sessions in the workplace with the partner businesses that participate in the program. So it enables students not only to get hands-on experience in the school, and then apply it within the business, the manufacturing firm, but it also gives the students an opportunity to establish relationships in the business, get a sense for, is this a location that I would like to work, or am I a good fit? Also, it gives the employers an opportunity to ask the students as well, or kind of vet the students to determine, is this somebody who would be a good fit for us? So upon completing the requirements for pre-apprenticeship, they graduate from high school, and they're guaranteed an interview with one of our partner businesses in either industrial maintenance, if they choose industrial maintenance, machining, or welding are the 3 areas that we're certified and registered for our apprenticeship in at this point. So they're guaranteed an interview. Hopefully by that point, after a 1.5, 2-year experience, the employer will have a good sense for, again, whether this individual is a good fit. So best case scenario, they are hired directly out of high school as a paid apprentice at one of our 6 participating partners right now. Our business partnerships continue to grow. We continue to add them. So they go in as a paid apprentice at that point, graduate from high school, very little to no debt, and they have a job that's a family sustaining wage job and pays good benefits. And so it's a great way to establish a pipeline from the high schools into the local companies, local business, and build those connections so that we have people graduating from high school going right into the workplace. At the end of 2 years, once they complete the requirements for the apprenticeship program, They will then be continued employment, adding a much higher level of value to the organization after only 2 years than probably they would have if they would have gone in right out of high school into an entry-level role. So that's how the pre-apprenticeship model works at this point. The apprenticeship we're still developing, because as our pre-apprentices graduate and go right into an employment situation, they then will become paid apprentices. So that's kind of an overview of how we have developed the model so far.
Okay, excellent. And so you mentioned that your employer partners came to you asking for the chamber to pursue this. What was their motivation in that, and what is their commitment to the project?
So originally we had 3 partners that were part of the original conversation, and all 3 were turning over a significant portion of their skilled workforce over the next 5 years, 5 to 7 years. So they had tried other means to try and fill that skills gap that they know they're beginning to experience now, and it's only going to continue to get worse over the next several years. So they decided that this was something that was absolutely necessary for them to invest in to make sure that they have the skilled labor that they need going forward to continue to carry their businesses into the future. And they came into it fully willing to invest in a program that was going to be financially sustainable over time, and that would also potentially benefit other businesses in the area. And that nice thing about the group model is that you can capture economies of scale. So as more businesses come on, the less expensive it becomes to manage such a program. So that was their primary motivation. They saw it as an opportunity rather than try and develop a standalone apprenticeship program in each of their businesses, because most of these businesses are small to mid-size, with the exception of 1 or 2, like Utz Quality Foods and RH Shepherd. But most of them are smaller and in many cases don't have the resources necessary to be able to manage a program. And so that's where the chamber comes in. We serve as the sponsor. We serve as the administrator for the program. We serve as a liaison between labor and industry and the business partners, and we take care of a lot of the administrative work, the grant writing, all of those kinds of things, and that enables our partner businesses it frees them up to do the things that are most important to them, and that is recruiting and training.
Excellent. So they understand the need to invest in the future workforce, but this model provides cost-sharing opportunities and some savings through scale.
Correct. Very correct. Now, I'll also say that, it's understood that we had established a budget in year 1 that was somewhere around $150,000. We did not necessarily hit that, but we were trying to anticipate, what our expenses would be in the startup phases of this. And we were also very fortunate to, in year 1 and going into year 2, to have the availability of some state grants that were provided through DCD to enable us to get some of our startup costs absorbed. So yes, we've been very fortunate that the businesses are investing, but we've also received some grants that have been very great in helping us to get started.
Excellent. So turning to the students themselves, what does it take for the students to qualify for these programs, and what qualifications or experiences do they need to have in order to be ready?
So typically going into, the freshman, sophomore year of, the high school experience, the districts that we work with have excellent guidance and career counselors in place who establish. Now, the school districts we work with are smaller school districts, so the career counselors, guidance counselors are typically in a position to get to know the students. And so many times from an interest, skill level, they can recognize students that are perhaps more academically inclined, students that are more hands-on and enjoy working on their feet and with their hands. And then you have students who are a combination of the two. And so the counselors do a great job of getting to understand the students and what their strengths are and how can we best then build upon those strengths and develop them into, whether it's an academic track or whether it's a track to, move into a pre-apprenticeship type role. So we've had great success with that. The students that typically we're seeing, and it's very early for us yet because we're only in our second year, but the students that we're seeing are coming in very motivated with an understanding about what kinds of opportunities they will have going forward in the future. The schools that we work with have developed on-site facilities. So we have a machine shop, we have a welding shop in our schools, we have a metals lab. So those are all things that have been part of the investment by local industry because we've received funding from local businesses for these facilities in the schools, and then equipment has also been donated by local industry as well. So the students, typically by the time they enter into the pre-apprentice program, they've been screened, they understand what they're stepping into, and to my knowledge, the students that have participated, both men and women, have done very, very well and are going into it highly motivated. They come out when they graduate with a certification. So let's say it's machining. We have an arrangement with NIMS, which is the National Institute of Metalworking Standards. Our students will graduate with a NIMS certificate that's transferable to anywhere, in the country. Any employer would recognize that. But it's a pretty rigorous curriculum to get your NIMS certificate, and they come out of school with, their NIMS certificate. So they will have a credential as soon as they graduate from high school, which I think motivates a lot of employees and certainly motivates a lot of parents to know that their son or daughter is going to come out with some higher level, some skill set that's going to make them very employable at a very good salary or wage rate right out of high school. So the students that we've worked with so far have been pretty motivated. We've had one student graduate as a pre-apprentice and is now employed in one of our local companies as a machinist or as an apprentice machinist. So we're already starting just after 2 years to see and experience some success stories.
Excellent. So in developing this pre-apprenticeship program, did you face any barriers and how did you overcome those if so?
I think, I wouldn't say we faced any barriers that were, insurmountable. When we got started, the employees were motivated. And I think, to start a program like this or a model like this, you really need the support of business. In fact, businesses need to drive it. Without businesses behind it saying, here's exactly what we need, and we're willing to invest, then it's going to be a real challenge to get started. And we had that early, so that was very, very helpful. I guess the biggest issue we had was no one really had any experience about how do we start an apprenticeship program, particularly a group model like ours that has multiple businesses. And that's where it was key for the Office of Apprenticeship to come in and help facilitate those conversations and really kind of expedite the process and made it easier for us to get up and running. So we didn't really encounter anything that was insurmountable. I mean, it came together fairly quickly. I'm convinced that any community can do this, but you need to have the champions and you need to have the businesses driving it. You also have to have the support of, the leadership in education as well. And again, those stars were already aligned for us. So for us to build the model that we've constructed over the last 2 years has been somewhat, I would say, accelerated because of those relationships that were established between business and education on the front end.
Sure. Okay. So look, sort of, I guess, a hindsight question. If you were to start a program like this from scratch, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently?
I certainly can't speak to, anything that we would do differently. We're kind of the traditional Chamber of Commerce. If you would have asked me 2 years ago, hey, do you think someday you'll ever be running an apprenticeship program or be a registered certified apprenticeship programs in the state of Pennsylvania, I would have said, no, that's not something we do. But when, your business members come to you and say, this is something that we need help with, then, you need to step in and figure out how you can make things work and how you can build something that's successful for your members. So what would we do differently? I'm not sure. It's like anything else that you start new. Funding can be an issue, but, you try and find a way between the chamber organization and the business partners to find the resources necessary to pull together and make it work. So that's always a challenge, is how do we get the money to pay for things, as well as how do we commit the labor and time to be able to, make it successful. So that's an ongoing challenge. So far, we've been able to work through it. How would we address that differently going forward, or if we had the opportunity to step back in time? I'm not sure that we would really do much different, because, when you don't know necessarily what you're stepping into and you have to figure it out as you go, that's exactly what you do. So it would be nice to have a nice big check on the front end of it to help get it all funded, but that's not the case. And we've been fortunate, again, to have the support to be able to pull it together as a community and make it successful.
And I think you make another interesting point about the role of chambers. I mean, traditionally, chambers have served as conveners and advocates, and I think it's sort of a new role for them to take the lead in initiatives like this. So I think you guys are on the leading edge of that. The last question that I would have for you is, for others who are just starting down the road towards pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeships, what advice would you give to them?
I think that, again, we started in manufacturing because our business partners, they approached us. They said, this is what we're looking for. I would advise any other community to, take a look at who are your business champions, what industry you're looking at. It could be healthcare. I mean, the nice thing about our model is that we started with manufacturing, but we can transition into other industries as well through our certification now through the state. It's just we would have to, complete the paperwork and get approved for that particular industry. So we can add additional partners. We can look at other types of apprenticeships and other vocations. So our model is very flexible. But again, I think to get started, you have to have a couple, at least one champion or two champions in business on the business side that will say, yes, we will help you and we will invest. You also have to have the champion on the education side, whether it's one school district or two, that will say, look, we're going to respond to the needs of the businesses in our community, because that is vital to the future economic success of our community. So we've got to make the investment together, and again, that comes back to the relationship building piece. And I think that's very key on the front end of it. So, my advice, and there's a lot of chambers across, when you look at the network of chambers of commerce across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, it's a great network. So if chambers wanted to step into this role, when you think about the opportunity that would be out there for businesses to connect through their local chambers and their local school districts across the state of Pennsylvania and get apprenticeships, at least in some level, started, or training started through those organizations, it could be really powerful for the Commonwealth.
That's excellent. Well, great. Well, Gary Laird, thank you again for taking the time to talk with us today. As a reminder, this is an audio interview connected to a case study written by NC3T, Manufacturing Pre-Apprenticeship Programs. So thanks again for your time, Gary.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.